Welcome, everyone. So glad to have you here tonight, this morning, depending on where you are in the world. I am joined by a fantastic guest today, Dr. Jemma Green, CEO and founder of PowerLedger. But before we kick off by turning over to Jemma, I want to thank Ocean Elders, as always, for being a great GBBC partner, as well as Medley Media for supporting us throughout this entire series. A couple housekeeping, just quick few things. Just want to highlight. Please make sure that if you have questions, that you look at the Q&A box and put in those questions. If you'd like to raise your hand, we can bring you on the stage and you can actually ask the question live. So feel free to do that as well. We'll be adding links in the attendee chat box, so take a look at that chat box when you get a chance. In the meantime, I'm going to hand over to Emma and say, bring her on. She's here. Thank you so much for joining us at 7 a.m. on Friday in Australia. Great to see you again, Jemma. No, not in person.
Great to see you too. Thank you for having me.
Great. Well, look, I think a lot of people already know who you are. You have a huge fan club around the world, and so does PowerLedger. But this is a get to know you session as well as getting an update on PowerLedger. So for those who may not be as familiar with your background, could you talk a little bit about how you started off? You were in investment banking, and then you went into academia and politics, and finally into what you're doing now, which is PowerLedger. It's so exciting. Walk us through sort of what's happened in your journey, starting with banking and so on. Yeah.
Sure. I did an undergraduate degree in finance in Perth, and then I moved to London. My father is Irish, so I have an Irish passport and EU passport. And I lived there for 11 years in London and worked in investment banking. And the first part of my career was in mainstream finance. And then I later moved into environmental and social risk management after thinking that I could introduce recycling facilities to JP Morgan's London offices. And I found this to be a really challenging project, but also a very rewarding one, and thought I'd like to work in the field of sustainability. And so I went on and did further study, Masters in Sustainability. And at that time, the banks were realizing the need for better corporate social responsibility. And so I was chosen to help set up the team for JP Morgan to look at its financing and underwriting in developing countries for high-risk sectors, so things like mining, oil and gas, heavy manufacturing and electricity. And then in 2012, I moved back to Australia, to Perth, where I'm from, and I had a bit of a sense of trepidation about that because I thought my exciting career days were over. But I got this idea. I wanted to build an eco-village, and I shared this idea with a friend, and she said, oh, you should speak to this professor, Peter Newman at Curtin University, and do a PhD on this subject. And I got roped into this idea and did my doctorate in electricity market disruption, and I designed a solar and battery system for an apartment building in Perth. But I was really struggling to find software that could create a trading environment within the condo where people would be allocated units of electricity, and if they weren't home to consume that, they could trade it with their neighbours, like a marketplace. Right. And I was really struggling to find a solution to that. And by chance, actually, a former banking colleague of mine from Sydney introduced me to these two blockchain people here in Perth, and they came to my house. I just had my first child about 6 weeks earlier. So I called up my mum and asked her to come over and hold the baby while I chatted with them. And they basically started talking to me about the blockchain, and they were so excited about it. And I didn't quite understand why they were so enthusiastic. But they said that the blockchain was going to change the world. And they were basically making all these quite big and bold statements. But subsequent to the meeting, we looked into applications for blockchain in the electricity sector and saw that it could actually create the market mechanism for the trading environment that I had hoped for in the condo. And that sparked us setting up PowerLedger 4.5 years ago in May 2016. And basically the company was set up with a couple of things in mind: trading of electricity across the grid, trading of dispatchable electricity, so things like batteries, and also trading renewable energy certificates, which are effectively like a digital asset that you can use to create a price signal to encourage more renewables.
Well, we'll certainly talk more about all these elements in a bit, but I do want to take us a little bit back in time, because Jemma and I first met actually right as you must have just met your partners, because we met you in the summer, I believe in July, June or July, on Necker Island at the Blockchain Summit. And it took you quite a arduous trip to get to Necker from Perth, but you made it, and we learned about Power Ledger then, and sort of a lot of great things happened after that. Jemma, do you want to walk us through some of the kind of very cool things that happened after that summit?
Absolutely, yeah. So that was in July of 2017. So Power Ledger was just like a year old. And as you say, it was quite a long journey. I think it was 42 hours and 4 flights to fly from Perth to Necker Island, which I did with my daughter Amelie, who was just over 1 at the time, and I was still breastfeeding. Right. So it was a pretty epic journey, but a very amazing and surreal experience, because up until that point, I really hadn't met many people in the blockchain field except my business partners, and there were like 50 people on the island who were working on in the field of blockchain around creating social impact and for social good. And it was just so inspiring to hear of all the work that people were doing, but also the many applications for the blockchain in these fields. And Bill Tye, who invited me to Necker Island at the summit, we announced that he would become an ambassador for Power Ledger, and I got the opportunity to speak to the people there. And after that, in September and October of 2017, Power Ledger undertook an initial coin offering, the first of its kind in Australia, and many of the people at the summit actually provided the initial backing and support around the ICO. So it was really like company forming in many respects, that experience where you and I met for the first time. And I think it really set Power Ledger up to fulfill many of the things that it's done to date, and has set itself up powerfully to be able to fulfill its potential and reach its ambitions, which is around transforming energy markets globally.
So thanks for that, Jemma. And to be frank with you, when people ask me, well, what ICOs out there have actually done what they say they're going to do and actually utilize the funds that they've raised for, real building, I point to you guys as well. They're basically, on one hand, I can count all of the really kind of really cool projects that have real product, that have real customers. And I'd love for you to share with the audience here, how did you guys make it happen? It couldn't have been easy. Frankly, yes, you raised a pile of money, but you have to execute. How do you think you guys differentiated from others who've just not delivered anything at all? And they raised some of them raised even more than you did. Without speculating on what they did, but just more, what did you guys do to really focus in on execution and delivering?
Well, I think that's a great question, and the answer is that we really focused on execution and delivery. In the short answer, and the long answer is that we're very passionate about the work that we're doing. We can see that there are many problems in electricity markets caused by renewables. In fact, we're advocates of renewables, but we're also advocates of a energy system that works. And the way renewables has been coming into our system has not worked. So feed-in tariffs have encouraged a lot of renewable energy generation at a time when there's not demand. And that causes reverse flows of electricity, which is actually breaking the grid. It's causing issues around frequency and harmonics, and it's also adding a lot more cost, because if you put generation where it's not needed, you have to transport it long distances. And because there's a kind of fault line in the conversation where people that believe in renewables think sometimes that it should be at all costs, like, you know, that we should have to put up with blackouts, and we should have to put up with high electricity prices, and that's caused like a political divide as well. And so we saw the opportunity with PowerLedger's technology to actually bridge the gaps in the system and make it more fluid and responsive, and offer our clients, utilities and property developers and business owners, the ability to innovate using the blockchain technology and deal with more complex environments in a very simple way. And so I think that that message has really resonated with the companies that we're working with, and there's a spectrum of like the amount of innovation that they want to do. And so our white paper, which we published in 2017, talks about dialing up or dialing down disruption depending on what their appetite is. And so when we work with clients, we really try and find out what's fundamentally important to them and how can our technology solve that. And I just think through that approach of partnership, that's enabled us to get a lot of traction. And so I think we have about 20 projects in 10 countries now. And I mean, we would like things to happen a lot faster than they already have. But I think in the past, probably this year, I would say there's been a very big shift from it being a push for us to that there's a pull now. And I think that we can start to see that glide path for scale emerging, which is really exciting. And there's a lot of new regulatory things that are changing shape around it too. So long and short answer is a lot of hard work and bloody mindedness, and not being afraid to talk about the actual fault line in the conversation, and that energy system needs to work and be stable, and it can't be renewables at all costs. And we see our technology as really solving some of the problems that renewables have actually caused.
Well, I think you raise an excellent point, because people hear renewables and they think it's the holy grail for anything. You know, it's like oil and gas bad, renewables good. And there's a sort of like view, a perception that those are the two worlds we exist in, when in fact, there's a lot of gray. And what you're doing is really helping to make sure that renewables is a good thing or are a good thing. But frankly, there's some negative points to it that need to be worked out and facilitated. So I'd love it if you feel comfortable talking about a couple projects that you're particularly interested in. I know you've announced so many awesome projects, but if you could just highlight one or two, and then we'll drill down and go from there.
Certainly. So I'll mention our project in France with an electricity retailer called Aggregators, and they are allowing their customers to choose their own energy mix. And they've got 200,000 customers, and we're just in the process of rolling out the platform, integrating with theirs. But what it will allow is the customers to not only have a renewable energy tariff, but specify, I would like this much solar from this solar farm, I would like 15% wind from this farm, and then I would like to trade peer-to-peer with my people in my street. And it allows this level of specificity and granularity when compared against a renewable energy tariff that might be entirely comprised of what is known as renewable energy certificates. So you might actually just be getting the energy that comes from the grid, which could come from any combination of sources of electricity. And then the energy company might buy a certificate which represents renewable energy generated somewhere else. So that's kind of, you know, I would call version 1.0 of renewable energy portfolio construction. And what Aggregators are doing is actually matching the consumption and the output of a solar farm or a wind farm within an interval. So within a 30-minute time period, if I'm consuming 5 kilowatts, I'll get 5 kilowatts from that solar farm. And using the blockchain, we measure the output of the generation asset and the consumption from the household and acquit those as a transaction. And I think that this is a very exciting innovation, which will actually drive and put price signals in the market to drive installation of renewables where they're needed and when they're needed. And it's similar to what Google have actually done in corporate purchasing of renewable energies, where many big multinational companies, like what would be called RE100s, are pledging to be 100% renewable energy, like procuring 100% renewable energy, but many of them do that with renewable energy certificates, which is okay, but it can actually cause the problems that we mentioned before with renewables in putting a price signal where they're not needed and when they're not needed. And what Google have been doing is looking at 24-hour renewable power and how can they actually establish that, and using their might and intellect crunch data to figure out how to do that. But not everyone can be Google, and so our platform really is about allowing electricity companies the ability to deal with that complexity in a simple way using our platform. So I think that what's happened in France with Exporteur is probably the beginning of that's using our vision platform feature, which is around the tracking and choosing energy mix. So that's one project I think is really interesting, unique, and also signaling, I think, what will be like version 2.0 around renewable energy procurement, which is matching your energy procurement against your load profile. And then another
Sorry.
Oh, sorry.
If I could stop you there just on that project, because it's super exciting and actually it's got multi dimensions to it. So I, as a consumer, layperson, have the ability to choose. So that's just a first awesome thing, which is the ability to choose and then choose from specific sources, right? Now, I'm also able to trade P2P. So does that mean, maybe not in version 1.0, but in version 2.0, could I possibly become at a place where I'm trading so well or often that I actually could, is it possible that we could have like prosumer traders actively doing this, or is it just really about just, the one-off?
Oh, absolutely. Prosumer and consumer traders. And I think that this is happening in Europe. Actually, there's a piece of regulation called the Clean Energy Package, which requires EU member states by the end of next year, by the end of 2021, to enable domestic sharing energy regulation and price the grid for discrete use of the grid. But in the US, this week actually, FERC 2222 was announced, which is effectively going to open up the market similarly. And what that piece of regulation says is that in 90 days, the states need to enact rule changes which will allow DERs, which stands for distributed energy resources. So that's households with solar or batteries, or businesses with solar and batteries, to be able to aggregate their load with each other and participate in the wholesale electricity market, and also trade electricity with each other. So this is really, and in the UK, the same thing is happening. There's a rule change called P 279, and in Australia, a similar thing is happening called the two-sided market. But I think these changes are akin to what happened with like the Telecommunications Act that the Clinton administration implemented in the US, where anyone that had a modem could set up and become an ISP and access the network and send packets of data. And so for me, this is the announcement in the US this week, alongside the other bits of regulation I just mentioned, for me is like the beginning of a new era around this choice, granularity of choice, and the ability to preferentially trade. I'd like to trade with my neighbours. I want to give my excess electricity to my school. So I think that this opening up and mainstreaming of this is happening now.
I think it's super, super exciting and critical. Amazing. Okay. Well, we'll leave that one at that. There's much more to come. And thank you for also highlighting the other regions where it looks like there's going to be movement in that direction. So that's fantastic. Let's move on to your other project that you want to highlight.
Sure. So that's actually in South Australia, and it's a virtual power plant. And so for this, we've partnered with a German battery company called Sonnen that is actually owned by Shell.
Mm-hmm.
And they have a household battery with an inbuilt inverter, and through our platform actually connects to the inverter and talks to the inverter and allows electricity companies to coordinate the use of those batteries to provide electricity in the peak periods, and also to provide grid services, so frequency control and ancillary services. And what this means is that households that have invested in a battery have additional income streams available to them to pay their investment in the battery off faster. And the energy company needs to buy energy in the peak or needs to buy ancillary services, but buys it from their customer instead of purchasing it from the wholesale market. And what that means is that they can provide a more create a more sticky relationship with their customers, and perhaps buy those services at a slight discount to what they would in the wholesale market. So the retailer gets lower cost hedging and portfolio risk management, and creates a more enduring relationship with its customers. So we're starting off with this one battery brand, but we'll also be incorporating other battery brands, including Tesla, into the portfolio. And the platform, which is our virtual power plant platform feature, means that any type of battery that has like dispatchable capabilities can be used to provide services both to energy companies and also the network operators. And so, yeah, I think this is a very exciting project, and I think that property developers are starting to incorporate solar and batteries as standard into homes, and citizens are become power stations, and not just, you know, when the sun's shining, but this is the beginning of, you know, 24-hour renewable power and the ability to deal with that variable load. So battery prices have come down very significantly, and in South Australia, where we're launching it first, because there's actually a high penetration of renewables, the grid is very unstable. So the prices are also very volatile. But using our marketplace and the price signals, what that is encouraging more batteries to be installed and sized in a way where they can actually monetize the opportunity, i.e. add more supply into the market and ultimately stabilize the grid. So we're very excited about this partnership with Sonnen and Power Club, the retailer we've announced so far, but we've also got 3 other electricity retailers that we're working with so far. And yeah, so that's the second project.
That's amazing. That is fantastic. You know, I think we are hearing more and more about the prevalence of storing solutions for energy, and if that includes batteries as well as, I don't know, what else might get invented over the years. But it's just interesting to see how that side of the market is evolving as well. I want to...
May I just mention one thing else on that I just thought of?
Yeah.
So just to talk about the blockchain in that project. So what the blockchain can do for virtual power plant trading is facilitate real-time trading and settlement, and also cross retailer trading and settlement. So using the blockchain, one retailer could access the battery of another retailer's customers, and so one electricity company can access the battery of another retailer's customers and settle on the blockchain. And so you can create cross-retailer trading and settlement marketplaces, so micro markets that sit inside the bigger market. And I think this is very exciting because you can add more supply and more sophistication, essentially. So even though I'm just with one retailer, I'm actually able to access income earning opportunities from my battery from a broad range of other buyers in the market. So it's effectively creating a kind of aggregation model using the technology.
Yes, absolutely. That's fantastic. And then my next question to you is kind of the next chapter beyond that is, you know, you have already, and you're getting more and more amazing data Prices are all over the place, but then with trading on your platform, it gets tighter, it gets smoother in terms of the volatility. What are some of the plans around the data itself? I'm sure researchers will be able to use it, but also could it help policymakers? Could it help those who are actually like lacking in the data that they need to see now that you guys are doing this?
Yeah, so in the grid of the future, forecasting is going to be a big part of actually understanding what the need state is. And the data and information from smart meters at small intervals is going to help refine forward-facing markets. So day-ahead electricity markets or even intraday electricity markets will forecast the need. And that will be based on having good quality data to do that. And if they don't forecast, if you don't have good data, you don't forecast the need well, then you might have shortfalls, and then you have price spikes. Whereas if you are good at putting good forecasting signals in from good data, so I think that the smart meter shift that's happening, the mass rollout of smart meters is creating very rich environments to refine forecasting, and also get the price signals right for forward-facing markets. And the data from lots of households and prosumers around the ability for them to alter their consumption behaviour. So that might be from an air conditioner, it might be from when they're charging their EV, it could be when they're running their heating or their dryer, for their clothes dryer. But that the ability to load shift, I think, is an important part. So it's not just about generating more electricity or having more batteries. You want to look at how do you flatten the load or move the load around. And so data is going to be absolutely essential around that piece as well. So there's kind of dispatching electricity where there's need, there's reducing demand or load shifting, and then the third piece is around curtailment. Now, this is a fancy word for throwing electricity away, so you don't want to do it too much. But if there is an event where you need to turn solar panels off, then data is really essential to understand how to do that, because that is effectively another response mechanism. So I think collectively, the data is going to be really important to create local electricity markets that are highly responsive to the need, dynamic and low cost.
Makes a lot of sense. And I think the quality of the data should only get better from here. Though there'll be so much of it, it'll be interesting to see how much of it gets parsed properly so that people can make heads or tails of what's going on.
Great point. Yeah.
I want to talk about sort of the international landscape and what your thoughts are around the energy markets, because with all that's going on with the pandemic, and let's face it, when the humans didn't go out for a good 3-4 months, it looked like a lot of environments recovered, or nature started recovering. And I think we've also in the US, for example, got some pretty extreme climate related issues going on right now. I mean, California normally has wildfires, but not this bad. And, the same for Oregon, and the entire West Coast is effectively on fire. We talk about some of the hurricanes that are coming into southwest of the US. I think it's hard to deny, and there's still people who deny it, but it's hard to deny that climate change is real, and we need to do something around reducing carbon emissions, but we also just need to do more wholesale things. And I guess from a macro perspective, what trends do you see that you find are moving in the right direction? And how is Power Ledger participating in some of that solution building?
Sure. Sorry, I got a dog barking in the background. Apologies.
You should have a dog barking in the background. We wouldn't expect anything less.
So in answer to that question, I think that there's sort of two different philosophical points around like the electricity grid of the future, and should there be lots of high voltage transmission moving electricity from one region to another. And I think we will see that, but in relation to things like fire risk, that actually creates more single points of failure. And distributed energy grids can be more resilient. I'm not saying it should be one or the other, but when you talk about addressing fire risk in fire risk regions, it may be more appropriate to look at more distributed energy models, so that if you cut off the generation in one area, it's just a discrete intervention that doesn't affect everybody to the same extent. And I think with the brownouts and blackouts and the need to turn off the electricity grid, that's in California, that's really highlighted this issue. In the western parts of the continent, so Western Australia, where I'm based, and California, they're the regions that have been most profoundly impacted by changing climate. And western parts of continents are experiencing already higher temperature rises and reductions in rainfall, stream flow, etc. And they are therefore at most high risk for bushfire and wildfires. And so I think that a reimagining of electricity grids in these regions is going to be essential. And electricity resiliency, I think, is going to be a bigger push as well. So it used to be that people might have diesel generators in their garages, but now I think looking at like home batteries and other ways that people can maintain energy even when there are system outages, I think is going to be really important. So I think that will probably drive the adoption of batteries, but also fairly large ones that can carry people for several days, or electric vehicles that can provide a lot of supply. And those things are actually going to create a more resilient grid, because it's the variable load, the dispatchable load, that's been the kind of, the unsolved question with electricity. Okay, it's fine to have, solar during the day and wind at night, but then you need, other sources of electricity to provide the differential power.
Sure.
But, the reduction in battery costs, I think, are driving location of batteries in markets near to consumption rather than moving electricity very far distances. So batteries are effectively just disrupting the need for more high voltage transmission lines, or reducing the need for them. So I think there'll be a trade-off between the risks associated with those kinds of systems and having smaller but more stable distributed energy systems and markets.
So you mentioned a lot about, we're kind of localizing energy now, which is a good thing, and distributing it out and having actually people participate, the consumer participate, as well as other stakeholders. If we have all of these microgrids or micro distributed systems around the world, do you feel like it needs one platform to operate, to make it sort of the very base level? Does that need to be the dumb pipes like the internet? Does it need to be common in order for this to work properly?
I think there'll need to be interoperability between different platforms and systems.
Okay.
Rather than there being necessarily one centralized system, our view is that there can be probably many different platforms that are offering bilateral trades, peer-to-peer, between different market participants that will net up to the wholesale market. And self-executing smart contracts will optimize for the best income earning opportunities for batteries, or to deliver the right outcomes for the system as well. So there'll be, various different rules around when electricity will be dispatched, how and when payments associated with that will be made. And I think that it will be far more autonomous than it is right now. And this, I think that the blockchain, I think, provides a low cost way to connect lots of small users to a market and to participate in a market, and for it to trust the information that they're getting and know and be able to readily see, oh, my battery was used for this, or my air conditioner was turned down for this and I was paid, and this is where, what the event was in the market. And I think that the data from this will empower consumers to make more investments, in systems. So I think that there is a need for the platforms that are going to bring all of the different elements together, the demand, the supply, connecting to the retailers, the households and the businesses, and the idea that there'll just be one platform in the future, I don't think is the way that it's going to
Right.
pan out. And I think that there'll be lots of different players, and I mean, like any markets that are, you know, new and nascent, there'll be consolidation and bigger entities will form. But I think as a principle, I think that the markets will be far less regulated, and price signals will be used to deliver the right system outcomes.
No, that's a very valid and good point. I tend to agree with you on that. When you think about countries who are really leading, because you take a multi-stakeholder approach, you work with some very large corporations on these projects, you work with government. Which governments, or sorry, I should say, which countries do you think are really leading in terms of not only the innovation side, but also just moving the nation or the collective region into a world where we can really truly see shifts in the way we consume energy and use energy and store energy?
Well, it might surprise you, like countries like Malaysia. I mean, the utility that there is one of the most sophisticated utilities that I've dealt with. They're really looking at where is the grid constrained, and how can they use peer-to-peer trading to actually drive the consumption of renewables in a scalable way. So rather than just do peer-to-peer trading, you know, from Kuala Lumpur to Sabah, like at the other side of the country, you know, effectively a financial transaction, how can they put the price signals in a discrete part of the grid to facilitate peer-to-peer trading, but growing renewables where there's actually enough demand to do that without causing reverse flows of electricity, which is what creates the grid issues that I mentioned earlier. And so they're actually looking at how to design the local electricity markets in discrete parts of the grid across, say, Kuala Lumpur, and how can technology like ours be used to support the establishment of the new marketplaces. Also in Thailand, the government there is running a lot of regulatory sandboxes to inform the writing of the new rules for their digital electricity market. And
Jemma, are you doing a project there as well? Sorry to interrupt you, but aren't you doing a project in Thailand?
Yeah, we have several projects in Thailand, but we actually have the largest commercial peer-to-peer trading project in the world in Bangkok, in the T77 precinct. There's currently 6 buildings in that, commercial buildings, so shopping centre, apartment buildings, a hospital rather. And I think there's 9 more buildings about to join that market. So they've had the solar installed already in them, and the marketplace is growing in size. And basically solar on the roof of these buildings supplies the building, but if they don't consume at all because they're more energy efficient, they can trade that with others in the marketplace. And the buildings pay 15% less for electricity from the solar, and the solar they sell peer-to-peer is 7.5% less than grid prices, and it's 100% renewable. And there will be, I think, so this year there'll be, I think, 8 or 9 more buildings coming online, and there's already several more buildings scheduled to join that marketplace. So it's actually growing in size, you know, organically over time. And the Thai government is intending to digitalise its electricity market, and I think they've got 30 regulatory sandboxes right now to understand how they want to change the rules. And the UK government is also working with the Thai government on how to facilitate peer-to-peer trading, you know, at large within Thailand. So they're, I think, really exciting shifts that we're seeing. And also in India, the state of UP, the most populous state in India, is rolling out new regulations to facilitate trading of electricity. And in fact, in India right now, there aren't renewable tariffs. So you can't say, I want to buy renewable energy and know that you're going to get that. So there's a whole piece of work going on around that. And we're engaged in conversations with governments on how to go about doing that. So I think that there's so many things happening in this space. Some of it is wholesale, like the regulatory change that I mentioned earlier in Europe and the US, but then others are more discrete pieces of work happening at country level.
Right. And if you're not already talking to the government of Tamil Nadu, we'll have to introduce you because they've just put out blockchain policy, and AI policy is a major focus point, like literally last week. So we'll have to introduce you to the head of e-governance there. You've got a couple questions, so I'm going to start taking those. Jemma, wait for it. And just kidding. They're pretty benign. But one person did want to know, how does your business model work for Power Ledger, in the sense that, you know, are you just providing software? How do you make your money, basically?
Sure. So Power Ledger is software for distributed electricity markets, and the business model varies from platform feature to platform feature. So we have one platform, but then the features are peer-to-peer trading of electricity, and that could be across the grid or within a microgrid. We have our virtual power plant platform feature. We have TraceX, which is renewable energy certificate trading platform feature. And the business model varies. So for the virtual power plant, it's a SaaS, a software as a service fee for each meter that's connected to the platform. And that's for residential customers. And for C&I customers or commercial and industrial customers, it's a SaaS model, but it also includes a percentage of the income that is generated as a fee. For renewable energy certificate trading, it's a fee based on the value of the volume of renewable energy certificates traded, a bit like a stock market, how that would work. So, and then for peer-to-peer trading, we have an upfront fee to set up the marketplace, and then we actually charge a very small fee, a clip on the ticket, based on how much electricity is traded on the platform.
Great, appreciate that. There's another question here related to, do you run into a lot of resistance from utility companies that you speak to? How do you convince them to partner with you?
I think that there was, I wouldn't call it resistance. I would say there's a lot of issues in electricity markets from renewables, and a failure to acknowledge those, I think, can cause resistance. But I think that once you start understanding the problems that utilities are facing and have, you know, something to offer that actually can help address those, that I think creates an opening. And we're actually advocating the retirement of renewable energy subsidies, and that you can grow renewables in a scalable way without taxpayer subsidy. And I think that resonates with retailers. Not all retailers, I think, need our platform, in the sense of, if you're a retailer with your own generation assets, you probably don't want to allow your customers to trade peer-to-peer, but many retailers don't. And so they have to buy electricity in the wholesale markets, and they're very exposed to the prices in the wholesale market. And so they would much rather buy electricity from their customers and allow their customers to trade peer-to-peer. So it depends on the retailer and the utility as to their interest and willingness to engage. But this year, I would say, since COVID, the amount of interest has changed markedly. It's gone from what I would call a push market to a pull market. And we're now getting a lot more inbound queries about how to set up peer-to-peer trading markets. We did a project here in Perth called Renew Nexus, and we wrote a report about that, which is essentially a blueprint for other utilities on how to do peer-to-peer trading. We explained what worked and also what didn't work, so that we could provide helpful insight. So we had received a lot of queries from that about how to do peer-to-peer trading in Europe as a result of the clean energy package regulation that's coming out next year. So there's a lot of setting up now and gearing up in preparation.
Amazing. And I'm going to take a couple questions here. I think someone is definitely more of an energy expert than I am, because the person is using acronyms. I'm going to go with the first one. Alan has asked, will Power Ledger's integration with batteries also eventually look to include batteries that are in electrical vehicles or electric vehicles?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes. We're working on a project right now that includes electric vehicles, but also trucks, electric trucks, and the charging stations for them as well. So it will include household batteries, commercial batteries, grid batteries, electric vehicle batteries, truck batteries.
Awesome. And Alan's also asked another question. In terms of environmental certificates, are you only looking to trade RECs at the moment?
At the moment, our focus is on renewable energy certificates, so RECs, as you said, in the US, and we've also set up one in Thailand for the ASEAN region. But we are going to be pursuing certificates in the European region, which are called guarantees of origin, or GOES.
GOES? Boy, they really could have used a better acronym, but okay, we'll accept that. Shane has asked you another question. When can we expect a true disruption by power ledger in India? I think you've already touched upon this, but will current power suppliers in India support this move? So I think if you can just go back to India a little bit about what you're seeing, hopefully happening in the next year or two.
Yeah, the government has huge ambition around renewables, and they absolutely recognise the need to create products and services that engage Indian consumers with renewable energy, which don't exist right now. And so I think there's a big push around how to create renewable energy certificates, PPAs, and productize renewables for the mass market. And so I think that is a huge opportunity, and it's why you're seeing like oil majors that are pivoting now into electricity have made huge acquisitions in the Indian market into renewables.
Fantastic. And I agree with you about some of the examples that you highlighted, particularly in Southeast Asia. I think people are underestimating the amount of innovation happening, not even just in energy, but across the board in payments in that entire region. And frankly, anyone who's not spending some time there on the innovation side is probably missing it, because there's quite a lot of advances happening, and the populations are quite young.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a lot of very tech savvy and appetite for tech.
Yes, absolutely. And I'm going to, we've got about 10 more minutes, so I'm going to ask a couple more questions that are here, but I would love to shift gears just a little bit, because Power Ledger has been around now for 4 years, just about. Where do you see, because you're in so many different lines of business at the moment, you've got several different products, you've got very different projects going on. Do you just see expansion as the energy markets move in different countries, or are there specific areas that you would like to see focus and development and growth in the next 5 years, let's just say?
Yeah, so it's a great question. So we have a single platform with many different platform features. And what that means is that a utility can choose the platform features that suit them. So they might just want to do the choose your energy mix, and so they can just use that feature. But they also might want to allow their customers to trade virtual power plants with batteries, so they can use that platform feature. They might want to add peer-to-peer. And so it's a single platform, a bit like, say, HubSpot, where you can use different features distinct from, say, Microsoft Office, where you've got different products that you log into. And what that means is that retail electricity companies can start off with one platform feature and then build out more functionality if they want to innovate on tariffs and new products and services for their customers. And so what we're building is an operating system for new electricity markets that allows utilities to digitalize and innovate on their services. And so we're kind of, building the plane in the sky, I would say, and using the projects that we're working on as test cases to refine the product and rapidly prototype and expand that. So peer-to-peer trading was our first product and our signature product, and the one that's most developed. But in our white paper, our technical white paper, we outlined all of the different platform features, and since then we've been building those out, and so each of the new projects that we've been announcing is really just building out the full functionality of the platform.
Thanks for that. And you have a question here that, I will say I relate to as well. And it's simply this. My energy bill is hard to understand. What kind of knowledge do you need to have, or educate, or knowledge or an understanding do you need to have to be able to trade energy on a power ledger platform? And this is for the average person out there.
Yeah, well, you don't need a degree. The idea of the platform is that consumers don't need to, you don't need to know what Intel does in your laptop to know that it does something and it makes it work. And the blockchain is a little bit like that. It's akin to, if you go to your corner store to buy milk, you can buy milk there, but if you go to the supermarket, they have barcodes and you can buy milk there. And they're both places you can buy milk, and barcodes don't define the supermarket, right? They don't, it's not like front and center, but they completely change the way supermarkets operate. And the blockchain, I think, is akin to this. It creates a lot more granularity and specificity and the ability to track things so that you can innovate around the product. What the customer sees isn't all that complication. That's all solved by the blockchain. It's like when you go to a dinner party and, you go to a restaurant with 10 of your friends, and some people have an entree and 2 bottles of wine and a dessert, and other people just had a main course. And when the bill comes out, someone either says, let's just split the bill, or somebody gets out their calculator and calculates that up. That's the tedious bit no one wants to do. And what our platform does is handles all of that. So the customer just gets very simple, like the ability to trade peer-to-peer and a summary of all the money they've made from those transactions. If they want to go into the detail, they can go and click on the button and look on the blockchain and check it for themselves. But it's all summarized, graphs, and the user experience is very simple and straightforward. And it's trying to engage people, at the market level, if they want to understand the technology and how power tokens work and sparks. That information is available, but it's not needed to be able to participate.
Right. Thanks for that. And I'm going to leave it up. I'm going to take one more final question from the audience. Someone's asking, clearly a New Yorker, because it says, is there going to be a time when New Yorkers choose Power Ledger as an option, or are you actually just going to be sort of in the backdrop and really I'm still dealing with the whatever utility company, but in fact it's powered by Power Ledger?
So the FERC 2222 that got announced this week in the US, that is going to change things quite significantly. So there will be a lot of what's called an aggregator set up, and they will aggregate the load of households from batteries and electric vehicles. So you may have your own electricity supplier and then another account with an aggregator that might use our platform to coordinate and dispatch all of those distributed assets. And so in terms of what the model will look like functionally, in the next 90 days, the rule changes will be implemented. But it will certainly change the opportunities for New Yorkers and households in the US. And I think that it's the beginning of a new era, I would say.
Wow, that's pretty exciting. And for those who might be interested, a future as an energy trader may not be that far off. Here's a question from Alan. Is Power Ledger looking at all to use its technology to trade in the carbon credit or carbon offset markets?
Absolutely. So renewable energy certificates and carbon credits are both digital assets, and they're actually perfect for the blockchain, because you can tokenize these assets and make the trade and the settlement one and the same entry on the blockchain, and reduce counterparty settlement risk. So I think that carbon markets have typically been like carbon taxes up until now, but governments are transitioning to emissions trading schemes, and that will create market opportunities. And a renewable energy certificate could equally be a carbon credit. And so you'll see, like, solar energy may be used to create a carbon credit if the income earning opportunity is higher than for a renewable energy certificate. So you'll start to see fungibility in those, and the blockchain can facilitate the issuance of, you know, the highest income earning digital asset. So I think that renewable energy certificates and carbon credits are very similar, and we see big opportunities for both. In the US, there's about $3 billion worth of RECs issued every year. And as countries start implementing their rule changes for compliance with the Kyoto Protocol and the Paris Accord, we're going to start to see more emissions trading schemes emerge too.
Fantastic. Music to my ears. I'm going to round you out with one final question to get your thoughts. What advice would you give to entrepreneurs out there around the world as an entrepreneur yourself, especially those who may be persevering through tough times and, you know, in need of maybe a bit of advice from you to have a little bit of a pick-me-up? And FYI, you also have someone who's thanking you very much. It's been fantastic. They've learned a lot. So that's more of a comment.
Oh, thank you. I mean, I think being an entrepreneur is such a unique and extraordinary opportunity and a privilege. It's also the hardest thing ever. But if you would like to do your greatest life's work, I think being an entrepreneur provides a platform to do that, to solve problems that you can't get the answer for out of Google. You have to figure out how to do them for the first time yourself and with your business partners and with your team. So if you like making your brain hurt, if you like the volatility of the unknown and also people's disbelief about that can't be that way, if you like that, then I think being an entrepreneur is the game for you. It is not a game for the faint-hearted. And you do need a lot of stamina, I would say, and energy, but it is so rewarding. And as you can start to see the glide path emerge for your idea and, breathing life into it, it's just the best thing ever.
Well, with that, Dr. Jemma Green, thank you so much for your time. It's been a pleasure. I can't believe we've blown through an hour, but we have. We'll have to invite you again in a year's time to see where Power Ledger is then. But I want to really thank you for taking the time out, especially with the Australia time zone, early morning, to speak to us. And I'm going to hand it back over to Arnold. Thank you, Jemma.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Always.